Welcome to a Faithful God podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Rotzel, and today on the show, we're going to talk about how to surrender to God, how to actually give up control and surrender your desires for God's desires. So grab those earbuds and your favorite beverage and join me for today's show. Well, hey friend, how are you? Welcome back to the show. I hope you've had a wonderful week. I cannot even believe that already it is the end of April. I don't know how these days and these months are just flying by so quickly. Gosh, before we know it, we're going to be right here celebrating New Year's again. It's just absolutely crazy. So listen, I am excited to talk about today's show because in today's show, as we talk about how to surrender our dreams, our desires, our timing for God's desires, this is when we really begin to experience great spiritual growth in our lives. So I am so excited to talk about this. So in today's show, I'm going to uncover what it means to surrender to God and why it's so important. We're going to look to the Bible. We're actually going to look to Jesus, for a beautiful example on how to surrender to God. And then I'm going to share 3 practical ways, right? You know, if you've been following me for any length of time, you know I am all about, we don't just learn these things. We don't just read the Bible. We actually have to apply the Bible to our lives. We have to apply these teachings to our lives. So I'm going to wrap up with 3 practical ways that you can actually take and apply this in your own life. Of course, I've got a freebie for you. I also put together a free resource that is 47 Bible verses to really help you, just to anchor you as you learn to walk this out in your life. So what exactly does surrender mean? It means willingly letting go, right? Willingly letting go of your desires, your timing, your plans for God's desires. In fact, this just came to me. This isn't even on one of my, or in my show notes, but this just came to me because right across from me right now, I actually put up I've got a canvas up there. Forgive me, I've got my fan blowing on me, and so my hair's going all over in my face here. But anyway, sorry about that. But right across from me, one of my favorite Bible verses is Proverbs 16:3, and it says, "Put God in charge of your work. Then what you've planned will take place." You see, we've got to willingly say, all right, I'm going to put you in charge, Lord. All right, Lord, you are in charge. You are in charge of my life. And, to be honest with you, when I started doing this in my business, in particular, just to kind of give you a little story, when I really took Proverbs 16:3 and really took it to heart and started praying differently, started surrendering Footprints of Inspiration, a Faithful God podcast, over to God, because there were just some things several years ago, or a couple of years ago, I just really hit this wall and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do next. I wasn't sure where to go, there were just a bunch of things that were going on, a lot of hard times, a lot of trials, just trying to figure out just the best way to proceed. And so when I sat down and God put Proverbs 16:3 in front of me again and reminded me that, to put him in charge. And when I started doing this, when I actually started surrendering what I wanted for Footprints and a Faithful God podcast, and in turn, what I wanted for you, and said, you know what, God, these are your people. These are your women. These are my sisters that you have given me in Christ. I am here to serve you. I am your humble servant and ready to serve you. When I learned to surrender that, oh man, that's when things start to explode. Your life just completely changes when you start to surrender your desires, your timing, your plans for God's. Now, we just talked about not long ago in episode, let me see what episode that was. I'm going to check my notes here. In episode number 114. And by the way, if you haven't listened to that one yet, we talked about how to trust in God's timing. And in order to trust in God's timing, we actually have to surrender our timing for his. So that's actually episode number 114. As with all episodes, if you go to footprintsofinspiration.com/114, you will be able to listen to the show. So the show number is right there in the the address, the URL address. So footprintsofinspiration.com/114. But we talked about that. And that requires surrender. Here's the thing, my friends, surrendering is hard. It's one of the most difficult things that we're called to do. But when we learn to surrender our desires, our plans, our timing for God's timing, that's when we start to experience peace in the midst of the pain. That's when we start to experience great spiritual growth. Because for so long, we're holding on to that control. We have to know all the details. We have to know how it's going to play out. And we've got to, we want it to play out in this way. But when we take a step back and say, all right, Lord, I am your humble servant. Show me what you want for me. That's surrendering. And that's when things begin to change in your life. That's when you start to experience fulfillment. I can't tell you how many times I hear women say, Tammy, I know there's something more for me, but I just feel so unfulfilled. I have no idea what it is. I don't know what to do. And the thing that I always tell them, right? First and foremost, go ask God. Have you put him in charge of it? Right? Because that's when we start to experience, the life God has for us is by surrendering to God. So this episode is important. This is where the rubber meets the road, my friend. This is where we step off the shores and into the deep waters, where we actually go deeper. We're not doing surface level, this overview of trying to dip and dab and, and here and here and here. That does nothing for us. If we want to experience great spiritual growth in our life, we've got to go below the surface. We've got to take one area and focus and go down, and we've got to learn to surrender it to God. And this is where this happens, when we're surrendering, is stepping into the deep waters. This is where, as Christians, we say, you know what? I'm ready for a change in my life. Nothing I've been doing is working. I'm feeling unfulfilled. I'm feeling blah, as we talked about in a recent episode as well. I'm feeling blah. I just don't feel like, anything. I don't know. You just have that feeling of, just things aren't going the way you want them to, or what have you. We've got to learn to surrender. So surrendering to God involves denying our own desires and following Jesus wholeheartedly, even if it means sacrificing our own plans and timing. Did you catch that, my friend? We have to surrender wholeheartedly, even when it means sacrificing what we want, our own plans and our own desires. That's when we start to experience that spiritual growth, that peace in the pain, that forgiveness. Gosh, just the life and the life God had for us. We've got to deny what we want in order to go forward. What is that? I'm trying to think of what that saying is. It just kind of came to me a moment ago, just kind of halfway, because it's not all there. But right, in order for us to move forward, we actually have to lay things down. We have to lay it down. And in order to do that, I can't think of what the saying is. Maybe it'll come to me in just a moment. But yeah, it is so important that we lay down what we want and make room for God to do his work in us, right? We have to do that in order to experience that spiritual growth that we want so much, that transformation, that life that he created us for. So as we're learning to surrender to the will of God, this is where we commit to serving God. We make our existence about the kingdom of heaven. Did you catch that? When we choose to surrender to God, we're committing to him. We're saying, all right, Lord, I am committing my life, my existence to serving you and the kingdom, right? It's when we become eternity focused rather than self-focused. Man, is that a hard one, right? We've got all these things going on in our life and in our world, and it's really hard it's hard to see above all of that and look towards heaven. when we've got all the hard things, the trials, the challenges, the demands on us that we all experience throughout the day, right? And experience in our lives. But you see, when we commit and when we turn our focus towards heaven, when we turn our focus towards serving God above all else, it becomes easier to surrender our desires for his. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 24 and 25, it says this: Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. If you want to find your life, to experience that life you were created for, we have to lay down our cross. We have to lay down our plans, our desires. We have to go into the deep waters and commit our lives, our very existence, to be kingdom focused, to be serving God and serving others, by serving others, And Matthew 16 is a beautiful, beautiful example of that. Jesus tells his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must lay down their cross, right? They what does it say again? I'm just reading right from my notes here, but they must not lay down. They must take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. You see, friend, we've got to take the focus off ourselves and the things we want. Our desires, our plans, our timing, all the things that we want, right? We want. We live in a world that just constantly feeds us and teaches us to do things in our own strength, teaches us to, get all the material things so that way we can, and that's how we'll find success. No, my friend, we've got to stop, or we've got to take our focus off of worldly success. And we've got to put it on kingdom success, right? We've got to put our focus on eternity. And when we do that, then we can surrender what we want for God's will. So in Matthew chapter 26, we have a beautiful example. This is one of my favorite examples of surrender in the Bible, and it is from Jesus himself. So here Jesus is, he brings a couple of his disciples with him. The crucifixion, it is coming near, it like hours away from when he knows Judas is going to betray him. They're in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus goes off by himself to pray. He is so broken, so afraid, so stressed, so emotional in this moment because he knows what's about to happen. And in Matthew 26, verse 39, this is what it says. Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." In this moment of high stress, this moment of fear, this moment of, an impossible situation that most of us will never, ever experience here in this life. And Jesus, I want you to take two things from this. Number one, there are two very important things from this verse. Number one, it's that Jesus said to him, "Lord, take this cup of suffering away from me." It's not wrong to go to God and ask him to take you or take that suffering from you, to take you out of the pain, to take you, or in other words, it's not wrong to lament, right? There would not be an entire book in the Bible called Lamentations if we weren't allowed to go to God and take all of our fears, our worries, our stress, all the things to God. So that was the first thing that I wanted you to get from that verse. The second thing is, even though Jesus wants to be out of this pain and suffering, does not want to go through what he's about to go through because it is unimaginable for us, right? Unimaginable even for him. He was so stressed by it. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But he says, "Yet not my will, Lord, but yours be done." You see, when we are in these times of trouble, in these times of fear and worry and stress, right? We all experiencing it. Excuse me. We all experience these things in our lives. But when we're in those times, what are we to do? We're to go to God and say, Lord, take it from me, because we can let him know, please, Lord, don't let me have to go through this. Yet, more than my desires, I want your desires, Lord. More than my will, I want your will to be done, right? It's a beautiful example of of surrendering to the will of God. Jesus knew how important this was. Jesus knew the pain he was about to go through. But because of what he did for you and I, he says that was most important to him. Because you see, Jesus came for one purpose, to save you and I. To save you and I, and to give you and I an eternity with him. And he knew that had to be done, even in that suffering and that pain, that excruciating pain and suffering that he went through. But he says, not my will, Lord, but yours be done. You see, Jesus was so stressed out. Now, I want to ask you a question right now. I want you to think for just a moment. How many times in your life, or even think back to a time when you were so stressed? You were stressed beyond belief. You were in so much pain, emotionally, maybe physically. You had absolutely no idea how the situation was going to play out. You were scared out of your mind. Now imagine that for just a moment. You know how bad that was for you, right? I know. I've got times I can go back to for sure. And yet in one of the verses, it teaches us, and which one is it? Let me go down. Actually, it's Luke 22:44, and I'm going to go to it in just a moment. I was just looking at my notes here. But Jesus was so terrified, so stressed. Something actually happened. It's pretty it's a pretty incredible thing. So let me just read this to you. So again, this is Luke chapter 22 verse 42. And being in agony of mind, he prayed all the more earnestly and intently, and his sweat became like great clots of blood dropping down upon the ground. Jesus was under so much stress, he actually sweat blood. Now that is called, and I'm going to massacre this name, forgive me, but it's called hematohydrosis is what it's called. That is the condition of what it's called. And this is what hematohydrosis means. A condition in which capillary blood vessels that feed the sweat glands rupture, causing them to bleed, and occurring under conditions of extreme physical or emotional stress. So my question to you is, remember I asked you to think back to a time where you were under so much stress and you felt like there was no hope at all. There was no hope at all. You felt under so much stress. You were so worried. You were so fearful. And you felt like it was impossible. And you didn't sweat blood, right? You didn't experience that let me look at it again. Hematohydrosis. You did not experience that, right? I'm not saying your pain wasn't awful. Me either. The pain, the stress wasn't awful. But my point is, Jesus, who was, we take our pain and suffering in this world and think it's awful, think we'll never get through it, think that there's never, ever any hope for us. And yet, Jesus, God, who is living on earth, was so worried, so stressed, that it was so much more than even you and I will ever go through, that he was sweating blood. And still, he said, yet not my will, but yours be done, Lord. When you're sitting in that painful situation, when you're scared out of your mind, when you have no idea how it's going to play out, and you feel like, you know what, this is impossible, there's absolutely no hope for me, I want you to remember Jesus and what he went through. I'm not, hear me clearly here. I want you to hear me clearly here. I am not belittling your pain. Not at all. Please hear me, my friend. I am not at all belittling, your pain. What I'm saying is, if Jesus, who clearly, because of this condition, like this actually happens. This is a medical condition that happens when someone is under that much stress that they sweat blood. So we know that Jesus was under even more than what you and I go through. And still he was able to say that. Still he was able to surrender to the will of God. I want you to remember that next time. Again, not to belittle what you're going through, but to empower you to say, you know what? All right, Lord. I have no idea how this is going to play out. I have no idea how this is how I'm going to make it out of here. But not my will be done, but yours, Lord. Because you see, when we open ourselves up, when we surrender, and it's almost like I almost have this picture of just releasing everything. And when you release everything as you surrender, it opens you up, inviting God in to move in and through your life, to work in and through your life. And that's when you begin to grow spiritually. That's when you experience breakthroughs. That's when you experience things you never, ever thought you could do. Because you surrender to the will of God. What do we know, my friends? We say this one all the time, and I want you to hear me clearly. Do not let this Bible verse fall on deaf ears. Like I know it's been watered down because we've heard it over and over and over again, but it's such an important Bible verse, and that's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for good and not for disaster, right? To give you a hope and a future. If we know that, we know we can stand on that verse, and no matter what we do, God has nothing but good plan for us. Does that mean we won't have trouble? No, absolutely not. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that. But the thing is when we know that we can stand on that Bible verse, Jeremiah 29:11, and we know that we can look at Jesus and everything he went through, and he could still surrender, then we know that we can too. Is it easy? Absolutely not. This takes training, my friend. This isn't okay, I'm going to do that, and you're going to flip the switch and it's going to be super duper easy. No. This takes training. This takes practice. This takes choosing to surrender every single day. This isn't a one and done thing, my friend. There are going to be some things in your life that you have to surrender to God, and you're going to have to surrender it over and over and over again. And that's totally normal. That is totally normal. And I want you to see that as the opportunity it is. I don't want you to feel discouraged by that. You should never feel discouraged by that. That's a great opportunity, because each time that you go back to God, you're connecting with him again. See it as the opportunity it is to draw closer to God. It's not a failure. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you live in this fallen world with Satan, who plays dirty. He plays so dirty. His playbook is so tired. No, this is an opportunity for you to draw closer to God. So as you start to walk this out, and we're going to get into this in a moment, but as you start walking this out, you will have to surrender again and again and again. And on some days, you're going to have to surrender over and over and over again. It doesn't make you a bad Christian. It doesn't mean God loves you any less. No. You see, God cares most about our hearts. And when he sees that you are persistent and consistent in surrendering to him, he sees your heart. He's going to show up and help you do the work. You don't have to do this on your own. I think about King Jehoshaphat when he cries out to God and says, this mighty army is coming towards me. I don't know what to do, Lord. And God says, the battle isn't yours, but mine. Surrender your trials, your challenges, your fears, your worries, everything, your plans, your desires, your timing to God. And he will show up and help you through it. But you've got to do the surrendering, right? Surrendering, again, it's like this almost dumping or, this release of all the things so that you can open yourself up so that God can work in and through you. And that, my friend, let me tell you, that's when you're going to send me a DM and start to say, Tammy, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what God showed me in this. Tammy, oh my goodness, you will never believe what God did this today when I chose to surrender. It was so hard. It was hard. It was painful. But I did it, Tammy. I did it. You're going to send those messages to me, and I'm going to be right here cheering you on, my friend, because that's when you start to experience great spiritual growth. As we learn to surrender to God, it actually helps us trust God, right? We learn to trust God more. And what are we doing as we surrender? We're walking in obedience. See how that all plays together? We're walking in obedience. And when we walk in obedience when we walk in obedience and start to surrender, our trust deepens, right? It becomes easier to trust him when other things come up. Not easy, but easier. Those times that as you start building on those, right? What do I say? All the time. We're building those spiritual reflexes. And as we learn to walk obediently and surrender to God, that trust goes deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And it becomes easier and easier when those trials and challenges come, or when we're facing a decision, or we've got these desires. It becomes easier, almost second nature, because we built those spiritual reflexes. We're working to build those spiritual reflexes to automatically go to God and say, all right, Lord, not my will, but yours be done, right? Surrender is a beautiful thing, my friend. It takes a little bit to get to that point where you can really sit there and say, oh, it is so beautiful to surrender. But I'm telling you, my friend, as sure as I'm standing here right now or sitting here right now, it gets easier over time. And the relationship, the connection that you build with God as you learn to surrender, man, it is big and it is beautiful and it's unlike anything you could imagine. You've just got to surrender. Okay, so how do we walk this out? Like, what are some practical ways? I am all about, we don't just learn these things and go on about our day. We don't just read the Bible, go on about our day. We actually take and apply these lessons to our life. That's how we experience spiritual growth and fulfillment and, all the things that we're seeking and hoping for is learning how to apply it. So how do we do that? First, I want to talk to you about Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. And this is what it says. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Friend, we have to let go of needing all the details. We have to surrender the need to understand how it's all going to play out. And you know what? There's so much freedom in that. There's so much freedom in not having to know how to do, to manage all the pieces, because God takes care of that for us. But we've got to learn, as we're learning to surrender, we have to learn to trust in him with all our hearts and lean not on our understanding, but on God's understanding, right? We talked about this back in episode number 114, learning to trust in God's timing. when we remember our understanding is this, like when we're looking through, if you look through perspective, it's this tiny itty bitty little perspective that we're seeing. But God's got the entire big picture. And so we've got to not lean on our own understanding. We can't surrender if we're trying to understand from our own perspective. The only way to surrender is to choose to lean on God's perspective rather than our own. So there are 3 things that you can do to start applying this to your life. Number 1, we ask God, right? We make that ask. Ask God to reveal the areas in our life that we are still holding on to. That ask God to reveal the area where we need to surrender. Okay. And then number 2, what you need to do is ask God, ask him to align your heart with his will. So as you're going through this process and you're saying, Lord, reveal the area that I need to surrender to you. Now, keep in mind, you may not get an answer right away, and that's okay. In fact, most of us won't get an answer right away, but we keep praying that prayer. We keep earnestly seeking God and asking him to reveal that to us, right? We talk about this in my course, Confident Prayer Warrior, as a matter of fact, is how to surrender to the will of God. And so what we have to do is we just have to keep making that ask. And then what we do after that, again, is we ask him to align our hearts with his. So as we're waiting for that answer, God is using that time to align our hearts with his will. In other words, to kind of start to see from his perspective rather than our own limited perspective. So that was number 1, pray. You knew that one was coming, right? That is always, always number 1. Number 2, surrender control, right? You want to surrender control with intentional acts in every area of your life. So what does that mean? What does that mean? I'm going to give you 3 different scenarios just to, if you're like me, like, okay, fine, Tammy, surrender areas of control. What exactly does that mean? Give me an example. Let me give you a couple different examples. Number 1, financial. Oh my goodness. I think so many of us have dealt with this over the years, thinking, oh my gosh, Lord, if only I had this much money, or only if I only won the lotto, right? Or Lord, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills next month, and I don't know what to do. And next week, the electric bill is coming due. When you surrender to God's will and you say, Lord, I trust you. I have no idea. This is impossible to me because I have no idea how I'm going to pay the electric bill next month. There's literally no money coming in. You pray, right? Remember, we go to God and we pray and we surrender that to him. Remember, the battle is not ours. It's his. Yes, there are things we have to do to take care of the finances, right? But remember, God promises to provide everything we need financially, wisdom, clarity, guidance, all the things that we need. So we have to surrender those fears and worries over finances to God and allow him to provide. What's another thing? The kids, right? Oh, the kids. How many of us sit there and worry over the kids and kind of hold a thumb over them, right? The generation of helicopter parenting, right? We're all in it. And, okay, you've got to do it this way because I know what I've been through. This what needs to happen. You need to handle this way. This is what you need to do. All the things that you're telling the kids. But really what we want, if you really take a step back and think about it, my question to you is this: do you want your will in your kids' lives, or do you want God's will in your kids' lives? Right? I had to take a step back a couple of years ago, and I had to really do this. When my oldest moved out, I will tell you, we are empty nesters now, but I'll tell you, it sent me into a tailspin, one I wasn't expecting. I was so excited for him. I was, he was doing everything he's supposed to be doing, but it hurt. It didn't hurt. He wasn't hurting me. I didn't mean it like that. But there's that hole in you, that open, gaping hole of your children who your life has centered around all these years, which, by the way, I know now the priorities of God. There were things I should have done differently as the kids were growing up. But at any rate, thankfully, God is so much bigger than our mistakes, right? He is so much bigger than our mistakes. But I really did have to learn to really take a step back. And I spent a lot of time that year saying, whoa, stop, wait a minute, Tammy. Do I want my will in his life, or do I want God's will in his life? And here's the thing. I thought I knew what God's will was for their life, for his life, for both the boys' lives. But honestly, number one, it was so much more. And there were some things that I was totally wrong on. I was completely wrong on. Totally. Like I failed miserably on that one. Thank goodness I learned to take a step back and say, Lord, I trust you. I want your will in their life, not my own. That wasn't easy, my friend. That wasn't easy at all. I had to step back as a mom. And oh gosh, that was such a hard year. All the things that I had to do that year. Yeah, that was a tough year. It really opened up like just a whole can of messy worms and like all the things, lots of past traumas, all kinds of stuff. And anyway, but it really was a pivotal year for me to surrender my desires for him, for God's desires. So there's another practical way with your kids. Another way is forgiving someone. Oh, Lordy B. I wish I couldn't even tell you this, but it's so true. Like every one of these things, my friend, I have been through: financials, kids, and forgiving someone. Oh my goodness. Talk about having to surrender. Forgiving someone involves so much humility. Oh my word. Again, lots of counseling. Yes. That's me. Lots of counseling. And really, when I started counseling, I went into it feeling like I deserved to have the feelings I had towards this person that hurt me so deeply. I went into it believing that I was the good person and they were the monster. I went into it believing, gosh, just awful, awful things that now I look back and go, oh my word, what was I thinking? I know why I was thinking it, right? Things like that happen. But, especially when we're trying to forgive and stuff. But the thing is, there's so much surrender in forgiveness. Like when we want that person who hurt us to hurt just as badly as we did, when we want that person to get what they got coming to them, right? When we want that person to pay for, like I just said, get what they have coming to them, pay for what they've done, hurt, apologize, do all the things. Man, it's hard to surrender all those things, isn't it? I will tell you, in my particular situation, I've not received any of those things. I haven't received an apology. Nothing's been acknowledged, but God, right? But because what I did was I surrendered all of those things that I wanted to happen. And believe me, this wasn't easy, my friend. This wasn't a flip of the switch. This has been many, 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 many months, years in the making, in the works, in the like progress and stuff. But healing, God can bring so much healing into our lives when we surrender what we think it should look like, what we think should happen. There's so much healing that happens. So much healings. So those are just kind of 3 examples of how to surrender. Obviously, like every one of those, I've experienced it. I'm right there. I don't teach from a pulpit. I teach right in the trenches with you. I am very vulnerable with you and let you know, like I don't walk any of this out perfectly myself. But each day, what we want to do is try to do better today than we did yesterday, right? We all want to get to heaven and hear Jesus say, well done, good and faithful servant. And the way that we do that is by surrendering our thoughts, our fears, our worries, our desires, our plans, our timing for God's. we lay down what we think needs to happen. And we say, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. Even in the midst of great suffering. Just like Jesus, who was literally under so much stress and pain, he was sweating blood. We have to surrender, my friend. We have to, if you're ready to stop, being on the surface here, if you're ready to experience spiritual growth, if you're ready to experience the life God has for you, you've got to surrender what you want for God's will. Now, friend, I want to caution you about something. Don't go out there and try to surrender all the things right now. Don't do that. You're going to set yourself up for failure if you do that. We all have things in our lives that we have to work on. We all do. It's going to be, and here's the great thing about that. Man, we've got a lifetime of surrendering and growing closer to God and choosing to, just do the work. We have a lifetime of that. If we try to go and surrender all the things right now, no, that's just setting yourself up for failure. Do not try to do that. Go to God, just like I said, start with prayer. Go to God and ask him what it is that you need to surrender first. Kind of like an onion, right? God's going to take you through the best action plan. Is that the best thing to say? I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but he's going to take you through it at exactly, or using the exact right sequence. I'm still not saying that right, am I? He's going to have you, as long as you're walking close to him, you're going to take it one layer at a time. Don't try to change all the things right now, right? Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure right away. So again, I said, how do we walk this out? Number one, pray. Ask God to reveal that and ask him to align your thoughts, your desires with his. Number two, actually intentionally taking these situations in your life and really giving that over to God, saying, Lord, I give this to you. I surrender this to you. This takes work, my friend. And the third thing, I promised you 3 things on that. The third thing is get into the word, right? We have to get into the Bible to uncover what Scripture teaches us about the character of God. We can't surrender, or it feels almost, we can't surrender fully until we trust God fully. And how do we trust God fully? By getting into the Word and learning the character of God, learning that he is going to be with us and that he is never going to let anything destroy us. Not that it won't be hard, right? We've talked about that many times on the show. But getting into the Word, number one, it shows us the character of God. But number two, what it does is it shows us example after example after example of men and women all throughout the Bible who walked it out, who walked out their faith. And God was there for them every step of the way. So we've got to, again, just real quick, number one was pray, right? Ask God, where do you need to, what areas in your life do you still need to surrender to him? Number two, actually taking then and actively doing that, doing the work to say, even if it's 25 times in a day, you're saying, Lord, I surrender this to you. Because then the next day it may only be 23 times. And the day after that, it may only be 21 times. It will get better practicing that. And number three, get into the Word. We always want to get into the Word to uncover that. So I promised you 47 Bible verses to help you surrender to the will of God. So what I want you to do to grab that free download is footprintsofinspiration.com/47surrender. That's footprintsofinspiration.com/47 47 Surrender. You can what I'll do is you just sign up for that. I'll send you the link or send you the download directly to your inbox. And this is going to help you really learn to surrender to the will of God. So my friend, I know this isn't easy. I know that surrendering is one of the hardest things that we are called to do. But I am here to tell you right now, as sure as I'm standing here, that every single time you surrender, when you just let that go, remember, the battle isn't yours. Just like King Jehoshaphat teaches us in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, that the battle isn't ours, it's God's. So when we surrender our fears, our worries, our plans, our desires, our timing for God's will, that's when your life starts to change. That's when you learn how to experience peace, even when everything around you is falling apart. That's when you start to experience fulfillment in your life. Like you're out there making a difference in the world, because you are. Because you start surrendering and you become eternity focused rather than self-focused, rather than worldly focused. You become focused on the kingdom and serving God above all else. And that, my friend, is one of the best places you can be, is living for God each and every day. It's life-changing. It is life-changing. It doesn't make it easy, but it's life-changing, and it's incredible, my friend. So listen, I hope this episode blessed you today. Again, hop on over to footprintsofinspiration.com/47surrender to grab those Bible verses. And my friend, if this episode blessed you, I hope that you will share it with a friend. I'm asking you, please, to share it with a friend, if you will. Just copy the link wherever you are listening and share it. Just let one of your besties know that this was a good podcast episode. It is my mission to put these episodes out there and just to help women really learn how to apply God's word to their life. And because I know what it's like. I know how incredible it is. I know just the life change that happens when you start living for God. And I really want to help as many women as I can. So again, wherever you are listening, if you will copy the link and share it with a friend, I would be forever grateful. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. And then listen, I will meet you back here next week in May for another episode of A Faithful God Podcast.